There's something deadly in the lakes of New Zealand. Original horror by One More Nightmare, featuring Ponch Monster Studios and Creepy Oz. The sun sat high in the New Zealand sky as the bus rumbled into Wanaka, a picturesque town nestled between the Southern Alps and Lake Wanaka. I was waiting eagerly at the station for Tony and Kerry, two friends I met while I was working in Australia over 12 years ago. We had instantly hit it off, quickly becoming a tight trio of friends and doing everything together. Even when Tony and Kerry took their relationship to the next level and I became the dreaded third wheel, our bond stayed strong. I had moved back to New Zealand just over a year ago for work and family, and we had kept in touch with weekly Zoom calls and WhatsApp messaging, though over time I had noticed that our Zoom calls became shorter and the gaps between our messages longer. That's why when they had told me that they planned to come over for a holiday, I practically jumped around my lounge room in excitement, tears literally welling in my eyes. The bus pulled up to the stop, hissing as it lowered to the curb before the doors folded open. I lifted my large, handwritten sign, accompanied with their enlarged passport photos that said, "Welcome back from prison, Tony and Kerry," a little jab at Australia's convict history. A few other passengers disembarked first, pointing at my sign with a smile on their face, as if they were in on the joke, before Tony and Kerry came down the stairs and out the door, immediately cracking up at the sign.
"Oh, come on, bro,"
Tony said in his bad Kiwi accent he had used when we first met. What? This is how we welcome all Aussies to New Zealand. That's if you're allowed off the plane, of course, I replied, smiling ear to ear.
"Give us a hug, you bloody wombat,"
Kerry said, dropping her bag and reaching out. I threw the sign to the side and gave Kerry a hug before breaking away to slap hands with Tony and pull him in for a hug as well. I grabbed Kerry's bag and we headed off to the car park, chatting away just like old times.
"Wow, that lake, that view is real nice,"
Kerry had said as we drove up the hill towards my place. The lake stretched out beside us, reflecting the blue sky and surrounding mountains. The pristine waters and lush greenery seemed to go on forever.
"It's massive,"
Tony added. Yeah, it is. It's like nearly 4 times the size of Loch Ness and even deeper. And it's not even the biggest lake in New Zealand, I said. So glad I finally got to show off the amazing views I got to see every day. We pulled up to my place, unloaded the car and ate. As the evening settled in, we found ourselves in the backyard, lounging in a covered bubbling hot tub with drinks in hand. Laughter echoed as we reminisced about some of the crazier things we got up to in Australia. The hours passed effortlessly by, and before we knew it, it was 2:30 in the morning. Right, guys, we got an early-ish start tomorrow, I slurred. Time to hit the sack. No funny business, okay? They're brand new sheets in there.
"No worries. We'll just use your couch,"
Tony said dryly as he slowly climbed out of the hot tub.
"Shut up, Tony,"
Kerry said, hitting him on the arm as I laughed.
"Don't worry, Tony will be asleep before his head hits the pillow."
Oh, and don't forget, it's a duvet over here, not a doona.
"Right you are. Now, where are my bloody thongs?"
Jandals, mate, jandals. Unless you're wearing Kerry's underwear again. We all laughed again as I pulled the lid over the hot tub, switched off the lights and headed inside for the night. The next day started a little later than planned. Slightly hungover, possibly still drunk, we managed to attach the trailer to the car and load ourselves full of coffee. About 2 hours later than planned, we were finally on the road. Our destination was the abandoned Boundary Creek campsite near the top end of Lake Wanaka, just under an hour's drive away. The plan was to park in the abandoned campsite, unload the 3 kayaks on the trailer, then kayak across the lake to a secluded cove with a sandy beach. The only access to the beach was by boat or kayak, and almost no one knew about it. There, we could swim, relax, cook up a feed, and have a hear of the dog, what my Australian mates would say about having a drink the next day to get rid of a hangover.
Is this Lake Wanaka too?
Kerry asked as we drove beside a large lake on our right. Nah, this one's Lake Hawea. It runs next to Lake Wanaka, I replied, glancing out the window at the massive body of water beside us.
Wow.
Was all she replied. 30 minutes later, we pulled up to the turn-off to the Boundary Creek campsite. Blocking the gravel road was a few orange road cones and temporary fencing. I pulled over, putting the car in park, and unclipped my seatbelt. Come on, Tony, gonna need your help with this. Without questioning me, he jumped out of the car and followed me to the fence. Here, move these cones, then let's make a big enough gap to squeeze the car and trailer in, I said, grabbing the first cone and moving it aside.
Roger,
Tony replied, grabbing the other cone. Once we had moved the temporary fencing enough to get the car through, Tony said,
Yeah, I'll wait here and move it back once you're in.
Sweet, sounds good, I said as I jogged back to the car. There wasn't much traffic around, as this end of Lake Wanaka was largely uninhabited and tourists generally stayed closer to Wanaka, so I was confident no one would see us. Still, I didn't want to muck around in case some Karen or Ken drove past and reported us. I drove through the gap we created and waited while Tony moved the cones and fence back, then began the short drive to the campsite area. The site itself was basic, a toilet block the only building, surrounded by camping spots for tents and caravans.
Why is this place closed?
Kerry asked as we pulled up next to the toilets. Apparently, a couple of years back, a bunch of campers went missing overnight. Their tents and cars, all that, were still here, and their chairs were all sitting around a burnt-out fire pit, but they were gone. Police searched for weeks, the scuba teams came in, but they couldn't find any trace of them, I replied.
Bullshit,
Tony snorted, waiting for me to crack a smile or laugh. His smile disappeared as he read my face, seeing that I was telling the truth.
That's crazy. How'd they not find them?
Kerry said. I don't think people realise how huge that lake is. If they ended up in the water and drowned, you would never find them unless they washed up on shore one day.
Well, just as well we know what we're doing then,
Tony said, the smile returning to his face. Do we though? I replied sarcastically, opening my door and stepping out into the bright sun. After storing our supplies in the kayaks, we ran through a quick safety briefing of our sit-in kayaks, made sure the spray skirts fit well, and did a couple of dry, wet exit refreshers. Once we launched the kayaks into the lake and checked each other's spray skirt was attached properly with the grab loop on the outside, we began our journey across the water, steering ourselves towards the beach cove known only to locals. I had switched my normal prescription glasses for prescription sunnies, knowing how intense the glare bouncing off the water at this time of day would be. I tossed up bringing my normal pair with me as well, but I worried that if I somehow lost them both, I would be unable to drive safely later. While I'm far from blind without them, my sight is blurry, and in the evenings it's hard for me to see the road without them. The kayaks glided effortlessly, responding to the subtle shifts in our body as we steered. There was a sense of unity with the water, a connection that heightened our awareness of the natural world. The rhythmic sound of our paddles slicing through the water created a soothing melody that harmonized with the gentle lapping of the waves against the kayak's hull. For the longest time, we didn't talk, just paddled, taking in the sight of the surrounding landscape until we neared the halfway point of our journey.
This is amazing,
Tony said, breaking the sounds of the lapping waves. I was about to agree with him when I felt my kayak drop suddenly, as though there were a substantial shift in the water beneath me. My heart skipped a beat as I looked around, skimming my eyes across the surface of the water as the kayak rocked violently side to side. The others hadn't noticed, their focus elsewhere as they paddled on slowly. Without warning, I felt the water move again on my left side, dropping the kayak quickly and violently. I tried to use the paddle to support my balance, but I was too slow and helpless as I felt the kayak flip. The abrupt immersion into the cold, clear water of the lake sent a shock through my senses. The cold water enveloped me, seizing my breath and causing an instant jolt of awareness. The unexpected flip of the kayak sent me into a whirl of splashes and disorientation, the sound muffled in my new underwater environment. In the process of flipping, I had lost grip of my paddle and my glasses had flown from my face. Instantly, though, my experience kicked in as I cleared my head. At first, I reached for my grab loop just to make sure it was there and ready if I needed to do a wet exit. It was. I reached to the underside of the kayak, which was now facing the sky, and banged on it with both hands 3 times before rubbing my hands up and down the underside of the kayak. This alerts the others, if they haven't already noticed my current predicament, so they hopefully turn and paddle quickly to me. Once they hit my kayak, I can grab theirs and use it to pull myself up and out of the water. This prevents me from having to exit the kayak and potentially losing all my supplies. As I continued to rub my hands up and down the kayak's keel, my mind shifted to the reason the kayak had flipped in the first place. I swear it had felt like something large had displaced the water, causing my imbalance. But this was New Zealand. The largest things we have in our lakes are trouts and eels, neither large enough to rock a kayak, let alone tip one. I glanced down into the depths below. My heart rate increased, the darkness and opacity of the lake's depths creating an ominous atmosphere, sparking the imagination with thoughts of hidden creatures and submerged unknowns. The profound stillness added to the eerie ambience, as if the lake was holding its breath, keeping its secrets shrouded in the depths. My hands continued rubbing, faster now, more desperate. I continued surveying the dark abyss when suddenly, movement 100 meters below caught my eye. A greenish shimmer-like reflection grabbed my attention as it looked like something glided through the water, almost like a shark would. Suddenly my kayak was rocked by a huge bang, and I realized Tony or Kerry had come to my assistance. I took one last quick glance back down to where I thought I had seen the movement only moments ago, but was once again greeted by just a dark, empty abyss. I grabbed the bow of the kayak that had come to my aid and flipped myself up, my hand slipping slightly as I almost toppled back over, before fully righting myself and sucking in a huge breath of air.
Are you all right?
Kerry asked, genuine concern in her voice. I sucked in a few more mouthfuls of air, wiping my face with my hand before using both hands to clear my hair from my forehead. Yeah, thanks. I lost my glasses, but aside from that, I'm good now, I replied, heart rate slowly returning to normal.
Looks like you lost my respect too.
Tony chimed in with a smirk as he paddled over with my paddle lying across his lap.
Not that you had much to begin with.
Yeah, well, I'm more devastated about the glasses. At least they were something I wanted to keep, I replied jokingly, grabbing my paddle off him as he got close. But thanks for getting this for me.
All good. What actually happened there? You not off or something?
He asked.
Are you sure you're all good?
Kerry chipped in. Yeah, I'm good. I think it was just a small rogue wave caught me off guard, I lied. Let's get moving. I need to warm up again. I started paddling, not waiting for an answer. I just wanted to get to land as soon as possible, to process everything that had just happened. While the movement in the depths below could be passed off as me just imagining things, whatever had caused the water to move so violently was harder for me to process. We continued paddling, eventually reaching the hidden cove with the private sandy beach. Beers were cracked open, tunes played, and a fire crackled as we relaxed in the seclusion of this untouched paradise. Tony and I kicked a rugby ball around for a bit, though he kept trying to handball it to me like an AFL player. "None of that here, mate. You're in rugby land now," I joked.
Righto, mate. That's the one where the big blokes just run into each other, eh? Lots of skill there,
he replied, always ready with a smart-ass response. "Nah, it's the one where the players actually have to catch the ball and not fumble it around on the ground like a game of hockey without sticks," I shot back. We continued to joke around, kicking and passing the ball. Kerry got involved too, as we sank a few more drinks and ate our packed food we had brought with us. The more drinks I had, the easier it was to forget about the events that happened on the lake. The day passed by, and soon it was evening. There was still plenty of light left in the day, but the sun was now over the mountains that surrounded us, casting long shadows over the water. Reluctantly, we packed up and began the journey back across the lake. The summer evening was still warm, although in the middle of the lake, with no direct sunlight, the cold air coming off the water sent a shiver through me. We paddled on, my sight a little blurry from the fact I had no glasses on, as well as all the booze in my system. That is why, when I first thought I saw a green-tinged fin break the water behind me, I thought it was just a wave cresting in the lake. It wasn't until it was much closer that I realized it was something much more terrifying. It moved with such grace, rising up and down as it sliced through the water towards us. Once it was closer, I could see it was webbed and seemed to be at least 3 or 4 feet tall. It then submerged, maybe 20 feet behind me. The whole time my voice had been caught in my throat, not quite believing what I was seeing. I felt my kayak drop again as the thing passed beneath me at tremendous speed. I opened my mouth to scream and warn the others, but was too late. The water exploded around Tony's kayak, spraying 20 feet up in the air or more. Through the wall of water, we saw a scaly, green-grey clawed hand reach up and grab Tony's kayak, pulling it underwater in an instant. Shock paralyzed us for a moment before Tony's kayak shot back out of the water, landing upside down. I paddled furiously towards his kayak as Kerry started screaming. As I got closer, I noticed large tears in the hole and, more horrifyingly, blood in the water. I pulled up to the kayak and dropped my paddle in the water, grabbing at Tony's kayak, desperately trying to flip it over. I wish I hadn't. When it finally flipped over, the black spray skirt was still attached to the kayak. Tony, however, had been ripped in half. His legs and lower half of his torso still in the kayak, intestines and organs slipping over the edge and into the water. His upper half was completely gone. Kerry screamed even louder at the sight, and I gagged as parts of Tony's intestines slid over my hand holding the kayak. "Go, Kerry, now! Paddle for the shore!" I screamed. The water broke again, and through the watery explosion I saw what looked like a reptile-like sea creature burst out of the water, landing on Kerry's kayak and dragging her under. Her scream was instantly cut off as the wall of water came splashing back down. Panic set in, my fight or flight activated, and I started paddling with all my strength, not looking back as I heard what I assumed to be Kerry's kayak shoot back out of the water. I paddled furiously, tears welling in my eyes, lungs burning from the intensity. I heard water breaking behind me, the sound of something breaching the water, giving chase. I pushed on harder, my hands hurting as my grip intensified on the paddles, blisters forming and tearing. Then, to my side, a dark shadow below the surface of the water moved with purpose before disappearing into the depths. Suddenly, my kayak was hit from below, sending me flying in the air. The paddle flew from my hands as I lifted 10 feet, maybe more, into the air. I braced for impact, slamming into the water at speed. I found myself submerged, surrounded by bubbles. Frantically flailing about, I saw a flash of a green eye in the water right below me as something huge moved towards me before everything went black and I passed out. I awoke on the shore of the Boundary Creek campsite, disoriented and alone. My kayak and all my belongings, including my phone and car keys, were nowhere to be found. Slowly, I made my way back to the road where I flagged down a passing car. The occupants, a mouldy husband and wife, listened intently to what I could recall as they drove me to the nearest town. Their expressions darkened as I recounted the events. I was sure they wouldn't believe me, or worse, would think that I'm crazy. But after a moment of solemn silence, the husband spoke. "Sounds like a taniwha." He explained that taniwhas were mythical creatures in Māori folklore, often associated with bodies of water. They were said to be shape-shifting guardians or protectors, but crossing paths with them could bring misfortune. The wife nodded in agreement, emphasizing the significance of the encounter. My friends' bodies and kayaks were never recovered. The police initially accused me of killing them and hiding their bodies and belongings, and tried to elicit a confession from me, but with no evidence, eventually had to let me go. I sold my property in Wanaka and moved as far from the water as I could, which, in New Zealand, is very hard to do. I don't know if it was a taniwha or if it was some other undiscovered deep water creature, but I do know this. I will never go in the water again as long as I live. There are things here in the New Zealand lakes, things that kill. I just want to thank my guest narrators, Creepy Oz and Punch Monster Studios. It's been great doing a collaboration with them on this original story. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, and as always, stay tuned for one more nightmare.